Hiya, welcome to Chris Parkin Shooting Sports. A few of you asked me to fit a scope and let you watch what I did when I fit a scope. So today I've just got this this new Mossberg rifle, the light chassis one. They've sent me a loophole scope, and I've got a set of Osuma rings made in Finland. None of these are my choices, they're all test products that are just on loan, but here's an example of exactly how I set up a scope ready to start the test procedure. Get out and shoot it, just like you would maybe on your way home from the first gun shop when you buy your own first rifle. It's not exhaustive, it's not infinite. This isn't necessarily how I'd set up a scope on every single one of my own personal rifles or long-term use. This is just how I set it up to start off with before I might learn some of the intricacies or characterful factors of the rifle that might make me want to change things like recoil or eye relief, scope height, things like that. So here's the general procedure. Well, because of lockdown, situation and facilities are slightly compromised, but the first thing we do, any rifle, take the bolt out, make sure it's not loaded, everything's good to go there. So I've not used these rings before, the Osuma rings from Finland, so it'll be a little bit of a learning experience for me too, but that's part of what I do as a reviewer. So these are quick release rings. I've literally opened the box, don't know anything about them, and I'm going to pop them on the rail. Picatinny rail here, so it's quite simple. I'm going to nudge that forward. Let's see if that locks. Not quite. Regardless of that, I'm going to put that one at the back because I want the levers to close together and forwards. So nudging forwards, lock the lever. Now that doesn't feel very tight to me. Usually the procedure with something like this is you set the lever halfway open and then tighten the opposing side until it feels snug. And that way, when it toggles and you lock it down, it will be the correct tension. In theory. So nip that, and then now we lock the ring closed. That doesn't quite work. Turn it off a little bit. A little bit more. Quick release rings aren't generally something I would choose, but you know, each to their own. I much prefer just to click things in place with a torque wrench. So that's the front ring done. Similarly, back ring, we know this time that the throw on the lever itself is quite spacious, so it'll take up a lot of the tension. Pop that one there, yep, towards the front of the rear action bridge, usually about the right space to start with. So, checking the scope's clean, all the rings are clear of dust. Some people might say they're going to lap the rings. Well, I don't do that on test rifles because it's not my rifle and it's got to go back. So I'm going to set that approximately there, and now I'm going to get in position behind the gun and have a look for eye relief on that. Now that's actually quite a good guess first time out. I think about there is where I would want it. But that might change slightly as I get used to the rifle, get used to the length of pull, length of where my comfortable head position is. As you can maybe just see here, different shooting positions from prone, improvised, sitting, kneeling, standing. They all change slightly and you're going to go for an average position overall. I've also set the scope on 8 power. This is a 14 down to 4.5. 8 power is a good sort of starting place because usually eye relief does vary very slightly on some optics. So that's approximately positioned. The next stage now is we're going to put the tops on these rings. Pop those on there. We've got 18 little fasteners. These look like a 2mm Allen key, maybe 2.5. But I'm going to just nip that down. This torque wrench is set at 2 Newton meters, which is generally acceptable for this sort of ring, this size of bolt. I'm just going to put those in position, tiniest little bit of a fingertip nip on them, nothing more, because theoretically I want to be able to adjust and move the scope in terms of its rotational position to get my reticle level. there are 101 ways of levelling reticles. People will put spirit levels on the action and put it on the top of the elevation turret, all sorts of things. The simplest way to me is I line the reticle up with the bore. Now, I won't say that's perfect for every situation, and of course if your elevation in the scope itself doesn't run perfectly in line with the reticle, that will cause you a windage problem. But on the other hand, if a scope isn't dialing in the direction the reticle's pointing, I'm vertically up, vertically down, horizontally left, horizontally right, I'm not really going to carry on using that, and I'm certainly not going to trust it for long distance shooting. This is how I would set up any rifle. Let's move these tools a little bit. And then now, this is my trick. It's very, very difficult to show this on video. But basically, push the rifle away from me and I bring my head back here. The exit pupil will diminish in size until it becomes a very small circle. And the higher the magnification setting we use, the smaller that circle will be. And I can line that circle up. If you see now, eye relief is correct there, okay? I come back to here and I lift my head. And as I lift my head, the circle drops down and it will eventually cut the reticle at the bottom of the field of view. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to line the circle up, or the arc crescent as it is at this point now, with the lower 6 o'clock stadia of the reticle directly in the centre of it. It's a bit tricky talking with my jaw pressed on the rifle, but there we go. Now that means my head is in the central position. And I can then line the 6 o'clock stadia straight down through the bore, and with a central point at the back of the action, which in this case I'm going to use the trigger sear. Everybody does it differently, everybody has a different way of doing this, but you know what? Very few people take hold of one of my rifles and go, oh, this reticle's set up a bit wonky, isn't it? So I've lined that up now. You can just gently tap the turrets like this, but only gently with loose mounts to get that alignment just perfect for what you want or what you need. And what we also want to do is make sure we keep the gaps approximately on the left and right even. So now I'm happy with the position of the scope. I'm just going to start nipping these down. You can maybe see I've just got my fingertips on the torque wrench and I'm going diagonally. So front right, rear left, rear right, front left, front right, rear left, rear right, front left. And that will stop anything twisting or moving while we're doing it. So, front right, rear left, rear right, front left. And I'll keep nipping those evenly in sequence until the torque wrench clicks to say I've got to the correct value, which in this case is 2 Newton meters. I can just hear that and listen now. Just about to click, 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 click. And when you mount as many scopes and as many different sets of rings and rifles as I do, you'll get the feel for the way that different bolts and different screws work. I use tier 1 rings quite a lot, sports match rings quite a lot, because I trust them and I rely on them. And specifically with the tier 1 rings, which use a titanium screw in a hard anodized 7075 aluminium body, the ring is very smooth. Hopefully your scope tube is smooth. And you'll feel the bolt as it turns into the scope mount running very smoothly. And I tend not to like scopes. If you read my reviews, you'll find I don't like scopes that have a rough body finish on them because it affects the ease of setting them up, and I think it also, when you rub them with your fingers, you get skin dust all over them. I know we're not too bothered about the looks on our guns, but I think they look a bit scruffy when you do that. So that's now in and it's nipped up. That's actually been quite an easy one to do. I'm still happy that that's straight, because normally what I will do is I'll work on either the front or the rear until it's shut down and it can't move, and that way I know nothing's going to twist and I can then do the opposite end. Lapping rings, it's not my bag, it's not my cup of tea. I'd rather go with something that's a precise fit and a precise alignment to start with, because all that lapping a ring does is remove metal from the ring. Okay, you get then a perfectly longitudinal straight mounting, but where's the metal gone to? What's the size of the 30mm or 34mm ring now? Is it 34.1 or whatever? Would you lap them? Well, a lot of people do. I never will. I'll use better rings, or I'll use rings like the Burris Signature XTR with self-aligning inserts, Seiko Optilox have self-aligning inserts, Burris Signature Z's self-aligning inserts, etc. But that's only on guns where I need to do that. So, some of you might be a little bit disappointed I haven't made more of a deal of it than that. That's all I do, because I've generally found that if the gun works in this sort of scenario, I don't need to do anything else to them. I agree that many people who are shooting extended distances are going to want to do vertical click tests and tracking tests on the scopes, shooting things like box tests, which I will often do on any rifle. If it's a scope that's specifically on test, I will always do a box test with it, because you need to know that your reticle and scope tube mechanics are in alignment, so that when you dial on however many clicks, minutes of angle, milliradians or whatever, that it's moving truly vertical and it's not tracking to one side, or if the reticle itself's tracking to one side but it still goes up and down vertically. These are all matters you need to know before you start sending bullets at longer distances. I hope that's been helpful. If you've got specific questions, please ask them. I will then ask them, I'll then put in the comment section what my opinion would be, or what I would do in that situation and scenario. As I said, this necessarily wouldn't be my chosen choice of optic, chosen choice of mounting system. Doesn't mean it's not good, doesn't mean it might not suit your needs, but it's not particularly for me. But the advantage of these Asuma rings is, if I flick those levers open, that scope will now, theoretically, come off the rail. And there we go. Some of you might have seen I made a video the other day using a Blaser system, and I shot groups with the scope being taken on off between each shot. You can do that with this kind of thing as well if I wanted to. Maybe I will if the opportunity arises. So this is the Mossberg. It's a 223-556. I think it's actually chambered 556 according to the barrel with a 1 in 7 twist. But we'll be having a go with that next week maybe. Depends on circumstances, because as we all know, we're a little bit limited at the moment. You might find it slightly annoying that I put the rings in the perfectly correct place to start with. I won't say I didn't dummy up with the rifle just to check before I made the video, but generally speaking, I know on any action like this, front near the barrel in the tenon, always for the best, and generally the front of the rear action bridge. I won't say it works every time, but that's generally where I start. So don't be afraid, take everything apart, experiment with it, move things around if it's not quite as you wanted it. Importantly, make sure you've got full clearance here. Even an air gap with a piece of paper can actually allow the barrel to touch the scope, because as that barrel resonates, as the bullet goes down it, it can touch it. Because I've taken scopes off in the past and found a little brush mark on the bottom of the ejective bell here, where on firing the barrel has actually touched the scope very gently. Always check your rail is tight first. That's a separate subject, but there's no point starting doing this unless the rail's in position correctly. And just remember, anybody who says you can't do that with a scope, I think he's wrong. Because when that gun fires, okay, it's only a 556, this one, it's not a huge whopper, but that scope tube and the whole rings and assembly bends and rattles like anything. So to be fair, doing that with it is only highlighting where, if anything's actually even slightly loose or rattling. Don't worry about anybody picking up the rifle by the scope. It would never bother me at all. If you make any movements, be careful to set it up properly. On a Picatinny rail or with any ring, hold the gun, push forwards to make sure it hits its recoil stop, because as the gun goes backwards, the scope is effectively not wanting to go forwards, which is why it's set up like this. Push them forwards so that they're up against a hard surface. I generally tighten a Picatinny rail to 5 Newton meters, maybe 4, and if it's a Chinese scope or a night vision I'll go maybe 3, sometimes even 2, because you can feel the steel is quite soft. Top generally always 2 Newton meters on any rings, whether there's 2, 4, 6, whatever. So that's me, that's the way I do it. Hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe to my channel, and please ask comments, because I can't cover every circumstance or situation, but I'm happy to answer questions if you want to put them in the comments box. Thanks for watching. Look after yourselves.